So all of this brings us to the so-called Barr fight.
Love it.
Yeah. The Attorney General saying in a new interview with ABC News that the president's comments and tweets make it, quote, impossible for him to do his job. William Barr insists he was not asked by the president or anyone from the White House to intervene in the Stone case. Barr says he spoke to the U.S. attorney before the sentencing memo was turned in and advised him not to recommend a 7 to 9 year prison sentence, but instead to defer to the judge. Here's what the Attorney General says happened after claiming the U.S. attorney defied him.
On Monday night, when I first saw the news reports, I said, gee, the news is spinning this. This is not what we were going to do.
So you were surprised?
I was very surprised. And once I confirmed that that's actually what we filed, I said that night to my staff that we had to get ready because we had to do something in the morning to amend that and clarify what our position was. I had made a decision that I thought was fair and reasonable in this particular case. And once the tweet occurred, the question is, well, now what do I do? And do you go forward with what you think is the right decision, or do you pull back because of the tweet? And that just sort of illustrates how disruptive these tweets can be.
So you're saying you have a problem with the tweets?
Yes. Well, I have a problem with some of the tweets. I'm happy to say that, in fact, the president has never asked me to do anything in a criminal case. However, to have public statements and tweets made about the department, about our people in the department, our men and women here, about cases pending in the department, and about judges before whom we have cases, make it impossible for me to do my job.
The White House press secretary released the following statement in response. The president wasn't bothered by the comments at all, and he has the right, just like any American citizen, to publicly offer his opinions. President Trump used his social media very effectively to fight for the American people against injustices in our country, including the fake news. The president has full faith and confidence in Attorney General Barr to do his job and uphold the law. Okay, Matt Miller, I've been really thinking about these comments, which seem to really push back against the president at first. At first, it's like, whoa, what's going on here? Is he stepping away a little bit? Is he a little bruised by all the criticism he's gotten because the legal community in Washington is so tight? But it seems to me that what he's saying is that these tweets make it harder for Bill Barr to help him be corrupt. What's your gut?
I think you have it exactly right, Mika. Look, Bill Barr often has a way of saying all the words that you want to hear out of an attorney general. If you just kind of go back in time and put the words he said yesterday in Jeff Sessions' mouth, that's exactly what we always wanted to hear from Jeff Sessions. We wanted to see him pushing back against the president's attacks on the Justice Department. The problem with Barr is his words about independence and the fact that he can't be bullied and the fact that he's going to do what's right in the traditions of the department are never backed up by his actions. And so when I see him yesterday, what I hear is when he says, you're making it impossible for me to do my job, he means you're not giving me the political space to operate, to do all the things you want me to do, Donald Trump. I think Barr has made it very clear that his interests and the president's interests are aligned. He will squash investigations into the president when he can, when it's too late to squash them, as in the case of Mike Flynn and Roger Stone and even the Mueller report. He will steer them in the president's direction. He will launch investigations into the president's enemies, as he's done with Jim Comey and as he seems to be doing against John Brennan with this investigation into the origins of the original election interference. He will do all these things for the president, but he needs the president to shut up and stop messing it up by talking about it publicly, because what happens when the president does that, he starts a revolt inside the Justice Department. And I suspect what Barr was doing yesterday was trying to quell that internal revolt that we saw start this week when 4 prosecutors removed their names. He's just telling the president, if you would just be quiet, I will give you what you want, but you have to give me the space I need.
Lemire.
John Meacham, the White House, at least so far, is speaking with one voice, those close to the president, so insisting that he's not upset by these comments, and that may be, if this is indeed the the play that we just described, but we also know the president doesn't react well to negative media coverage. And as more that we see Barr's comments played over and over in the next few days, I think we might be hearing from him. But my question to you is about this. In the White House statement there, they said the president, like any American, has the right to voice his opinion. Yeah. John Meacham, fact check this for me. Is he, the president, like any American? And if he's not, why is this so inconsequential?
Yeah, no, that part of the phrase jumped out at me. And boy, you wonder which editor in the White House added, including the fake news. Yeah. I wonder if that was put in Sharpie. It sort of has that feel, doesn't it? The remarkable thing about the president is his capacity to, and it's epic, even in presidential terms, his encyclopedic grasp of grudges and his ability to hold them and weaponize them going forward. Mrs. John Kelly this week, right? Remembering a conversation. Congresswoman Dingell, he alleges, they had this phone call about Chairman Dingell's funeral. There's this remarkable internal taping system that spews out everything that the world as he wants to see it. And he's not just like every other citizen. To go straight to your point, John Adams in 1790 wrote that the president, the first character, was going to be the object of all eyes, the object of all attention. And that creates an enormous amount of responsibility. But at this point, we're so far into this, we know that the presidency is not going to change him. For us, it seems to me, to go to Michael's point, it's now on us in a large measure and on Republicans in most significant measure to decide whether he's changed the presidency itself and whether he's changed our public culture forever. I've been basically optimistic for almost 4 years now that I would take James Madison over Twitter. I'm less so now as things go on. There were a number of Republicans I thought would stand up at the last possible moment and say enough. And as you played Congressman Jeffries' statement, you have this remarkable moment where the train is blowing past rapidly. And what folks are going to have to decide at a certain point is, do you want a president picking on judges, trying to change cases? The two things, my two check boxes that were going to be break the glass kind of emergencies, were going to be, was he going to try to remove a judge? Would he ever try to overturn a verdict unilaterally? And would he try to postpone an election? These were the two things to watch out for. And he's getting awfully close on the first.
Well, I mean, at this point, I think we can safely say if there's a question that begins with, would he ever do A, B, or C? The answer's yes. So it's up for Republicans to decide how much exactly can you live with.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.